66-year-old Daniel Rigg sat in court, handcuffed. Just another old man facing minor charges. But hidden behind those quiet eyes was a war story no one saw coming. What unfolded next would redefine what it means to be a hero. "You're under arrest, Grandpa." He didn't flinch. Not a word escaped his lips as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Instead, he stared straight ahead, calm, silent, like the world falling apart around him was nothing new. In the courtroom, whispers rippled through the crowd. A few chuckled, some exchanged skeptical glances, and one juror even rolled her eyes in dismissive disbelief. To them, he was just another bitter old man, caught up in a fight he didn't belong to. But nobody saw beneath the surface. Nobody, not even the judge, knew the story hidden behind those quiet eyes. This was the man who once ended a war with a single shot. The only person who truly understood the gravity of his past was en route to the courthouse now, wearing 4 stars on his shoulders, a witness whose presence would soon turn the entire case upside down. Welcome to Veteran's Voice. Before we dive deeper into this emotional journey, tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit subscribe and join our growing community. Every voice matters, and your support helps bring truth and honor into the light. The courthouse was smaller than most expected, a modest 2-story brick building squeezed between a faded library and a quiet dentist's office, nestled in a southern town where strangers still nodded politely and uniforms still commanded respect. That morning, before the sun had fully risen, the parking lot was already half full. Inside, reporters took their places discreetly near the back, sensing a story waiting to unfold, though the headline remained a mystery. Officially, the case was minor. A physical altercation at a gas station. No weapons, no blood. Just a confrontation between a retired Marine and a younger man who claimed the veteran threatened him with military force. A routine misdemeanor. Or so it should have been. But there was something about the veteran's silence that unsettled everyone. He didn't defend himself. He didn't explain. He simply showed up at every hearing. Alone, wearing the same plain shirt and jeans, with a gaze that made bailiffs uneasy, though none could say why. Rumors spread. Some said he was unstable, others called him stubborn. One article labeled him a disgruntled ex-military man with a temper problem. His record? Ignored. No one bothered to ask. In this town, that was the story they told themselves, just another veteran who couldn't adjust to civilian life. He lived alone on the edge of a wooded lot in a trailer without internet or mailbox. Neighbors spotted him walking at dawn, back straight, measured steps, always the same boots, always silent. Some thought him strange, others thought him broken, but no one thought he mattered. In court, the name printed on the prosecutor's file said it all. Daniel Rigg, age 66, former U.S. Marine. That was all anyone needed to know, or so they believed. His public defender barely glanced up from her notes. She had tried to talk to him, but found only silence in return. No family, no witnesses, no alibi, no anger. Just a distant calm that even the judge hesitated to challenge. The bailiff led him in slowly, the cuffs tight but unresisted. Daniel's eyes fixed on nothing in particular, not defeated, just finished. Behind the defense table, curious whispers floated. "Isn't that the guy who yelled at some kid over a parking spot? No, I heard he threatened to shoot someone. PTSD, probably." The judge entered, the room stood, the trial began. Witnesses gave vague, uneasy testimony. A clerk recalled aggressive body language. A woman heard him muttering something about knowing how to kill. The victim, a man in his 30s wearing an unnecessary neck brace, told the jury he feared for his life when Daniel looked at him. When pressed on what was said, he hesitated before claiming Daniel told him he could end him from 800 yards without blinking. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Daniel sat motionless, expressionless, unmoved. The prosecutor leaned forward with practiced confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this man may have served once, but that was a lifetime ago. What we see today is someone clinging to the shadow of a uniform he no longer wears. someone who believes his past entitles him to intimidate others. That is not heroism, that is dangerous. He let the words linger. Some jurors nodded, others avoided eye contact. The public defender remained silent. The judge gave instructions. Deliberations were expected to be swift. The bailiffs escorted Daniel back to holding. Cameras clicked, whisperers followed. No one in that courtroom noticed the sleek black SUV rolling up to the courthouse steps. Inside, a man in a crisp uniform stepped out, his collar bearing 4 silver stars. His gaze was sharp, not on the reporters or cameras, but locked on the name etched on the docket: Daniel Rigg. The deliberation room door closed with a hollow click that echoed through the silent courtroom. The jury had been gone less than 3 minutes when a man in the gallery whispered to a reporter, "They won't take long." The judge stepped away from the bench but stayed in the room, reviewing notes as if she sensed the verdict was merely a formality. In the far corner, Daniel sat alone, his hands rested on the table, fingers still. His cuffs were removed, but a heavy chain still hung from his belt. He looked like a man with no intention of defending himself, if anything resigned to the fact that people only see what they want to see. Outside the courtroom, the hallway buzzed. Someone had posted a photo of the trial online, and local news anchors set up just outside the double doors. Veterans who had served with Daniel began arriving quietly, through whispered messages and unspoken threads. They weren't here to testify. They hadn't been invited. They came because something didn't sit right. Then the black SUV pulled up again. No sirens, no fuss. The man who stepped out wasn't a bodyguard or politician. He was General Samuel Wyatt, retired Chief of Special Operations Command. Most civilians wouldn't recognize his face, but the moment he entered, the reception clerk straightened, and the security officer at the metal detector nodded without asking for ID. "Where's courtroom 3?" the general asked, voice calm but commanding. He wasn't here to watch, he was here with purpose. Inside, no one yet knew he had arrived. The jury had not returned. The judge tapped her pen quietly. The public defender typed aimlessly. The prosecutor checked his phone with a smirk. And Daniel Rigg remained exactly as he had the entire time, unshaken, unbothered, unmoved. Not defiant, not proud, just ready. In the hallway, General Wyatt moved past journalists without a word. One reporter called out asking if he was part of the press team. Wyatt didn't answer. Another recognized the stars on his shoulders and quietly began recording. The general paused just outside the courtroom doors. His face, composed as ever, carried a weight deeper than guilt or anger, something closer to respect mixed with urgency. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps give light to voices that deserve to be seen and heard. After a moment, he opened the door and stepped inside. The judge looked up, puzzled at first, then immediately stood as she took in the insignia. The entire courtroom seemed to freeze. The jury had not yet returned, but the atmosphere had already changed. Reporters shifted their cameras nervously. The prosecutor blinked slowly, as if unsure whether this was a prank. Wyatt didn't approach the bench or the prosecution. Instead, he walked directly to the defense table, toward Daniel Rigg. For the first time, Daniel lifted his head. Their eyes met. No words were spoken, yet the room felt different. The silence wasn't awkward, it was reverent. For a moment, no one breathed. Standing tall, hands clasped behind his back, the general faced Daniel Rigg like a man carrying a burden, heavier than orders. The judge, still standing, cleared her throat softly. "General, may I ask what brings you here today?" Wyatt paused, then met Rigg's eyes before turning to address the courtroom. His voice was calm, clear, and unwavering. "I'm here because this man sitting before you is the reason I'm alive. He doesn't know I came today. He didn't ask me to. In fact, he probably hoped I wouldn't. But when I heard about this trial, I couldn't stay silent." The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. Reporters leaned in. A juror, returning from the hallway, froze in the doorway, sensing she had stepped into something far larger than a simple legal dispute. Wyatt stepped closer to the bench. Not to impose, but to be heard. 31 years ago, I was pinned behind a crumbling wall outside Fallujah. My unit was scattered. Communications were down. I had 2 wounded men and no way out. We were surrounded. Then, out of nowhere, a single sniper cut a path open. He didn't speak. He didn't wait for thanks. He just fired. 12 confirmed kills in under 5 minutes, every shot placed with surgical precision. The last one through a rooftop hatch at 936 yards. Moving target, crosswind. Shots saved my life, and the lives of the men with me. Wyatt scanned the room as murmurs spread. With sniper was Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Rigg. He raised a hand, silencing the courtroom. I've read the testimony. I've seen the charges. But whatever words this man allegedly spoke in a parking lot, he's earned the right to be heard in a way none of you can measure. He doesn't talk much, never did. He didn't come back from war seeking parades or praise. But if you think for a second this man is a threat, you don't know what restraint looks like. Wyatt turned to the judge. With your permission, I'd like to speak to the jury. The judge, stunned, nodded slowly. Proceed. Wyatt stepped to the front of the jury box, took a deep breath. There's a reason Daniel Rigg didn't defend himself. It's not because he's guilty. It's because he's tired. Tired of being misunderstood. Tired of a world that confuses silence with threat. But I know him. I know that when chaos erupts, when bullets fly, when no one knows what to do, you pray a man like him is nearby. He paused, then quietly added, You don't put men like this in chains. You put them in history books. Then, before the courtroom, the reporters, the judge, the jury, and the man who once saved his life, General Wyatt did something no one expected. He dropped to one knee, not out of weakness, not for show, but as an apology, not for himself, but for a system that had forgotten who Daniel Rigg was. No one in the courtroom moved. Not the bailiff, not the prosecutor, not even the judge, frozen behind her bench, one hand resting on her gavel, the other covering her mouth. The jury, returning from deliberations, stared in stunned silence at the 4-star general kneeling before the man they were about to convict. One juror wiped a tear, another looked down in shame. The prosecutor opened his mouth to object, but the words never came. Daniel Rigg did not react immediately. He didn't seek validation or offer surprise. His gaze remained steady on the man kneeling before him, eyes heavy with a lifetime of unspoken stories. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he rose, walked to the general, and extended his hand. Wyatt stood and took it. In that moment, the 2 men stood face to face, not as officer and sniper, witness and defendant, but as something older, deeper, soldiers bound by a brotherhood the rest of the room could never fully grasp. The judge cleared her throat, voice breaking slightly. In light of this testimony and the extraordinary context brought before this court, I am dismissing all charges, effective immediately. Her gavel came down, not with force, but with finality. Daniel's chains were removed. This time, no one touched him without reverence. He did not rush to leave. Instead, he nodded once to the jury and walked slowly down the aisle. Each step echoed through the wood-paneled chamber, like the closing punctuation of a sentence long overdue. Outside, a few veterans stood at attention as he passed. One saluted without being asked. Reporters tried to speak, but no question felt worthy. Daniel Rigg kept walking, silent as ever. General Wyatt followed, not as an escort but as a witness. As they stepped into the sunlight, for the first time in years, Daniel Rigg looked less like a ghost and more like a man returning from a war that had never ended. Sometimes, a hero no longer wears a uniform. He doesn't march or salute. He doesn't seek ceremony. Sometimes, he walks into a courtroom with a quiet stare and worn boots, not asking for recognition, just hoping the world will stop misunderstanding the silence he's carried for decades. Daniel Rigg never asked to be defended. He never told his story. He didn't need to, because there are men like him who believe doing the right thing shouldn't require applause. They carry their scars privately, their memories quietly, and their honor with a weight most will never recognize until it's too late. But not this time. This time someone spoke up. This time someone remembered. This time, a man with 4 stars on his shoulder knelt in a courtroom, not to plead, but to correct something we all too often forget. That sacrifice doesn't end when the war is over. That those who saved lives overseas are still fighting to survive here. That silence doesn't mean weakness. It often means strength, too deep to explain. Daniel Rigg didn't leave that courtroom vindicated. He left unchanged, because he never needed a verdict to tell him who he was. But for once, the world paused long enough to see. And maybe that's the lesson we carry forward. Not to wait for medals or ceremonies, but to recognize greatness while it still walks quietly among us. Thank you for sharing this moment with us today. Stories like these remind us that kindness isn't just an act. It's a quiet power that can heal, restore, and change the course of lives. Compassion and justice don't always come in grand gestures. Often, it's the small, courageous choices we make every day that light the way forward. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing, not just to support our channel, but to help spread hope and humanity to others who need it most. Remember, as the poet once said, sometimes the smallest step in the right direction ends up being the biggest step of your life. Let's take those steps together. Until next time, keep your light shining bright.